3 years on from the reveal, and 1 year since the initial trailer, news has been slow for the upcoming release of Puella Magi Madoka Magica the movie, Walpurgisnacht Rising. We've had our time to theorize and speculate and react, and I'd especially like to thank all 20,000 of you who tuned in for the analysis I did on the first trailer last year. I did not expect to get that much attention, and while my videos have been few and far between and my quality is clearly not the greatest, I enjoy making videos like this. Today we're going to catch up on what we've learned in the time since and discuss what my opinions are about the film now, 1 year on from the trailer. Before I start, I'd like to also give thanks to fellow creators Clear and Sweet and Karma's Anime Analysis, as their overview and discussion of the first trailer video also helped me to continue looking into the trailer. Of course, I did that after my initial video, so I couldn't really add much to it at the time. Anyway, I appreciate fellow content creators like this, and while I do not always agree with theories and speculation of others, I think it's important to be able to listen and learn from fellow creators. More fan content for the series is always a good thing. As such, both of their channels will be the top pinned comment of this video. Starting off with a quick recap, in April of 2021, we got the announcement of the long-awaited fourth Madoka Magica film. At the time, we only had the Japanese title to go off of, and most of us were translating it as either Revolution, Walpurgis' Heaven, or Turning the Tides of Walpurgis. This announcement was for the 10th anniversary of the series and sent the fandom into a frenzy, myself included, as at the time I threw together 2 videos about the movie when all we had to work with was a poster and the vague hints left from Rebellion and the concept movie trailer. 2 years later, in 2023, we got the full trailer of the film and its English title, Walpurgisnacht Rising, and the trailer gave us theory crafters plenty to work with. Redesigns for the main cast, awesome and surreal imagery, multiple Homuras, a new mystery character, and a vague non-answer to all of our questions, exactly what we would expect of Shaft. At the time, we got the planned release date for winter 2024, so, December of this year going by Japanese time. Halfway through 2024, we got the announcement of the delay to 2025, and as of the day I'm writing this, we got a 30-second teaser which also confirms the 2025 release date. From here on out, we will first be explaining and then discussing and speculating about what we saw in the new trailer released this week as of writing. It's only 35 seconds long as opposed to the trailer from last year, but there is arguably just as much to break down. Without further ado, let's go over what is in this trailer. The trailer immediately begins with Homura falling backwards as she stands in the middle of some kind of caged or enclosed area as a storm is raging behind her. Following this is an extended shot of Homura and Madoka dancing, the latter appearing shocked or startled, while Homura, whose eyes are curiously red, is clearly happy as they dance around what appears to be the interior of Madoka's house. We see the interior of a labyrinth and a minion who I'm fairly certain is a Claridol. Also at this point, narration begins to play, so far saying, "I will." Next, we see Homura looking at herself in a mirror, and this Homura is different from the one at the start, as she has flat black hair, a different ribbon, and deep royal purple eyes. The mirror which she looks into reads Dume Venus. We see more of a labyrinth, a spiral staircase that seems to lead nowhere as the narrator continues to speak, saying, "Go with hope." The next major shot we see is Akama Homura falling from the sky. The most peculiar thing we see here is that the wind has frozen, implying Homura stopped time. Perhaps we are seeing the aftermath of a great fight. That said, some gold and white debris also falls with her, implying something else might be going on instead. The narrator continues to speak, saying, "Hope will go with you." Next, we see Madoka eating, presumably cake, with a smile on her face, and while we cannot know for absolute certain, the next shot implies that she is seated across from somebody. Tending to a cracked teacup, we get the reveal of a brand new character who has a wild head of green hair. We know it is not Hitomi, as the shade of green is different, and her eyes are auburn or perhaps even red. She is seated in the center of a caged area, which may be the same place we saw Homura falling in the beginning. The surrounding area is a pond filled with lotus flowers and trees with no leaves rising from the water. The green-haired girl goes to touch her middle finger, which we saw has a soul gem ring on it in a prior shot. Next is Nagisa playing in a ball pit with yet another new character, a young girl around Nagisa's age who has distinct orange hair, and although it's a little hard to notice, she also has a soul gem ring on her left hand. Following this is an interior shot of what I assume is yet another labyrinth, but this one more directly tied to Homura in some way. In the middle of it is a large glass statue of a nude figure looking down, while glass cases filled with an array of books that all have the same design surround it. The statue appears to also be filled with these books, and Sayaka in her magical girl attire is seen in the middle of the room below the statue. During this next scene, the narrator says, "The miracle that I achieved with you," while we see Mommy eating some kind of dessert in the middle of a brightly lit room. I'm hesitant to say that this is definitely a real cake shop or cafe, as the imagery has some things which stand out to me, making me believe it is also part of a labyrinth. The next scene is a close-up shot of a lounge where we see brown cushions that were placed on it beginning to explode, ejecting feathers out of them. The narrator continues still, saying, "Will surely guide us," as we see a brief shot of Kyoko atop a tower in the middle of a cityscape eating a dessert of her own. The next scene which follows is very interesting. It shows runes from the series, which, as you know, are associated with witches, as all their names are written in runes, flashing on the screen. Behind the runes is a series of cards or pieces of paper being flicked through at a rapid speed, and it becomes immediately apparent that these are the witch and familiar profile cards, showing the monsters that have all appeared throughout the show. Next, we see Sayaka in her new look, seated alone in an auditorium in the dark. A flash of light occurs, causing her to shield her face, and for a single frame you can see the lower half of her witch form Octavia. We see a very brief shot of Cube next to the new orange-haired magical girl whose face is obscured, and in the background is a stack of books which all appear to have the visage of Walpurgisnacht on their cover. Due to them being books, I would assume this is linked to the scene of Sayaka and the statue from earlier. We then see a girl's arm with a rolled up sleeve which has been stabbed with a rusty knife that stays inside of the wound. Blood pools onto the table and inches closer to a cup of tea next to the arm. A black lizard, imagery associated with Homura, disappears into the wound and a glass construct forms around the arm, shattering the knife. There is a long shot of clouds circling while the sun or another source of light pierces through. There are white feathers which are flying upwards, but one descends and begins to turn black. That is the last shot of the trailer, where we then get the titles, staff credits, and a coming soon message. As I last stated, this short trailer contained a lot of new information that we can break down. If you're still watching at this point, thank you for staying tuned. From here on out, we'll be talking pure speculation and theory crafting. First, let's talk about the music choice. It is the ending section of Sugrum Identitum, which is the theme of Walpurgisnacht, which plays whenever she appears in the original series. Coincidentally, the beginning portion of the same song played during the first teaser shown in 2021. Well, I may say coincidence, but it definitely wasn't. Sugrum Identitum is an important piece of music for the series, and using the first section in the initial teaser and now the most recent trailer using the same song's ending section is evocative of what this film is about. We do not see her directly in any of these new shots, but the title and use of music is more or less telling us exactly what to expect. Walpurgisnacht Rising will, above all else, be some kind of origin story for the ultimate witch. The titles of Madoka Magica films are very important. Beginnings was used because it was Madoka's origins, Eternal was used to signify Madoka's fate at the end of the film, Rebellion had a double meaning of those rebelling against the new system, as well as Homura herself rebelling against Madoka's wish to bring her back out of the goddess, the law of cycles. To that end, Walpurgisnacht Rising being titled the way it is means a lot. Now, when I say origin story, I don't mean to suggest that this will be solely about Walpurgisnacht. That much can be immediately disproven in just the initial teaser alone. Like the stories which preceded it, Walpurgisnacht Rising will serve as another chapter in the cyclical story of Madoka and Homura. Rising, in this sense, likely refers to the idea that Walpurgisnacht herself will be looming over the story like the trailers seem to imply. Her presence is felt heavily despite her not even being there. Imagery of her, references to her, and the music all join together to paint a picture befitting of Walpurgisnacht. She is an inevitability, known by every magical girl throughout history. No matter what, she will return. She must return. Walpurgisnacht is famously defeated by Madokami in the original TV series and second film Eternal, which served as a monumental feat as even Homura, with all of her knowledge about the witch, had continuously failed to defeat her. That she is back in this film despite everything that happened really knocks her all the way back up to the top in terms of power, and it makes sense when you consider that Rebellion ends with Homura tearing apart the Law of Cycles so that Madoka can be separate from the goddess, effectively removing what slew Walpurgisnacht from existence. Without Madoka as the Law of Cycles, it becomes an immediate uphill struggle against an enemy that already took an incredible amount of effort to beat the first time. My guess is that this will be a central theme of the story, a choice between two impossible outcomes. Let Madoka live with freedom but Walpurgisnacht continues to be a destructive force, or have Walpurgisnacht removed at the cost of Madoka's autonomy and existence, and Homura will likely try to figure out the solution that circumvents these outcomes. While we are here, let's talk about the magical girl behind Walpurgisnacht. For years, her true name and origins have been the topic of debate as the prospect of learning the identity of the series' main antagonist is obviously something we all want to do. Being realistic here, I think there is a solid chance that despite her being a focus of this film, Walpurgisnacht's identity will still not be revealed to us. But for the sake of speculation, and to finally throw my hat into the ring, I'd like to talk about the most likely options for who Walpurgisnacht is. Let's not beat around the bush here. I truly believe that Homura is the most likely one to be the true identity of Walpurgisnacht. Both share an incredible amount of similarities both in design and lore. To start with, each witch in Madoka Magica is described by a single personality trait or nature that reflects who they used to be. For example, the nature of Octavia von Seckendorf is falling in love, a direct result of why Sayaka became a witch in the first place. So, the nature of Walpurgisnacht is helplessness, a trait which can easily be tied to Homura in several ways. First, the nature of Homura's wish was an act of desperation to save Madoka. It's an odd wish when you really think about it. Directly quoting it, Homura's wish was, quote, to meet Miss Kaname all over again, but this time instead of her protecting me, I want to be strong enough to protect her. She just saw Madoka die in front of her, and she needs to act but does not have the time to think. In her mind, what better way to fix this problem than to simply redo it? It is a fully desperate gamble, and by all accounts, it was born out of a feeling of helplessness. Secondly, consider that towards the end of the series, Homura starts to feel like she is moving further and further away from Madoka, a direct result of the karmic destiny bound to the girl by Homura's wish. At that point, she goes through a period of feeling like trying to reach out to Madoka is pointless, like she cannot truly help Madoka because the one she sees is not her Madoka. And yet, she still resets at the end of each failed timeline because she has to. Looping, repeating, and cycles are a theme consistent with the entire show, but of course, there is nobody who represents this theme better than Homura. Homura quite literally repeats the same month over and over in an attempt to alter the fate of Madoka, despite how much is against her. While Homura displays it the best, Walpurgisnacht also has an interesting link to this theme as well. Walpurgisnacht's helpless nature makes it continue to rotate and move throughout the world until everything is caught up in its drama as the stage constructing witch. Doesn't this sound awfully similar to Homura's plight? Walpurgisnacht has a set of minions which are just labeled as question marks in all media so far, but I like to refer to them as the clowns or jesters. These minions appear as silhouettes of six girls, and it has already been speculated that the six represent other witches, which would fit as in the original series. While there are more than six witches, of the witches that are there, six would fit into the role of these jesters as they are all essentially just laying the groundwork for Walpurgisnacht. These six in my mind are Gertrude, H and Ellie, Gisela, Elsa Maria, Isabel, and Patricia. Elsa Maria is one which Sayaka thought specifically and may not have a place here as opposed to, say, Roberta, but this is my general thought of who could be the clowns or jesters. Another approach to look at this from is that the clowns represent the main cast, so that being the Holy Quintet plus Hitomi or the Holy Quintet plus Nagisa. These are equally solid options in my mind, Hitomi being the most likely to me as Hitomi and Homura share a tiny bit of connection thanks to Madoka Magica Portable. Now, the question is, why does this matter? Homura's actual witch form, Homerlily, has a set of minions called the Claradolls. The dolls' role is similar to that of the clowns in that they set the stage for their master, Homerlily. There are 15 of them, meaning it is not an exact match for the clowns, but on some level they represent members of the cast because each one has a different character trait. The last of the Claradolls represents love, and in Rebellion it is stated that it hasn't arrived yet, which I think refers to Madoka and the Law of Cycles. Now, this is one of the weaker points, but there is a bit of a thematic link there that's worth mentioning. Walpurgisnacht's design is much like an hourglass, and she has enormous gears for the lower half of her body, harkening back to the design of Homura's shield, which runs on a gear system much like a clock, and hourglasses, of course, evoke the feeling or thought of time. On the topic of design, in Walpurgisnacht Rising's September 2023 trailer, we saw a Homura whose design is starkly different to the one we know. She wears a Victorian style dress with frilly trimming, which is immediately reminiscent of Walpurgisnacht, who is seen in a very similar dress. My theory back then was that this Homura would be the one to become Walpurgisnacht, as she could be taking on the role of contractor and have access to a large supply of magical power by granting the wishes of magical girls. The next most likely after Homura to be Walpurgisnacht is of course the series' namesake Madoka. While I do not personally believe this, there are still quite a few interesting parallels to look at when considering our options for who the ultimate witch is. While Walpurgisnacht's nature of helplessness aligns with Madoka's perception of herself in the original series, as she often felt like she could not do anything to assist her friends and watch them all fall one by one. This belief of helplessness, while it may not be a large focus, could still be present in Walpurgisnacht Rising since Madoka is put into a world where she is not a magical girl. The idea that Madoka could become Walpurgisnacht is assisted by the fact that her life in this new world will be different. Kriemhild Gretchen, Madoka's original witch form, came about because of that specific set of circumstances. Gretchen represents Madoka's undying mercy and need to purify every living being and bring them into her version of heaven. If her life were to be different, it stands to reason her witch form could be different too, leading to the possibility of Walpurgisnacht. On the topic of Gretchen, as stated before, her goal is to purify every living being and bring them into her heaven. In Rebellion, the role of the Law of Cycles was explained as trying to bring Homura, the one soul still grappling with despair, into heaven. The Japanese title of Walpurgisnacht Rising, Walpurgis no Kaiten, has the word kaiten in it, which can be translated to mean heaven, i.e., Walpurgisnacht's heaven. Heaven has been largely associated with Madoka throughout the series, and so if Walpurgisnacht has its own version of heaven, it is worth suggesting that it may only be because it is Madoka. It is implied that Walpurgisnacht may have a similar karmic destiny to Madoka. How karmic destiny works is that because Homura's wish is focused on Madoka, each time Homura resets back to the start of the month, Madoka grows a little in power and potential, as visualized by a pink string. By the end of the TV series, Homura has reset over 100 times at least, and so many strings have been placed on Madoka that her potential strength is extraordinary to the point that Mami can sense it and Kyubey is enamored by it. To this end, we might suggest that Walpurgisnacht continues to get stronger just like Madoka. In the first timeline, while it is not shown, Madoka may have defeated Walpurgisnacht after Mami weakened it and then subsequently fell to it. This costs Madoka her life, but we do not see Walpurgisnacht afterwards, implying its defeat. Yet, in each time following it, Walpurgisnacht becomes more and more difficult to beat, to the point where physical attacks have no effect on it. While Homura's wish was focused on Madoka and not the witch itself, there is the implication that because of the events surrounding the wish, Walpurgisnacht may be affected by this karmic destiny. Another way to look at it is if Madoka and Walpurgisnacht are one and the same, Madoka's karmic destiny may simply extend to Walpurgisnacht because of this. Madoka's first name, when written in kanji, can be translated to mean round, which refers to the nature of looping and foreshadows her ascension to the law of cycles. But when combined with the kanji of her surname, Kaname, and more specifically Kana, which can then be shortened to Ka, you may then combine it with the kanji Ba. It becomes Baka or fool. As stated numerous times already, Walpurgisnacht represents the fool turning through the world. To me, this is a bit of a stretch because you need to introduce a completely unrelated kanji to get baka, but it is still a very interesting observation. The clown minions, if they represent the Holy Quintet, also works for Madoka, as the law of cycles, Sayaka and Nagisa are her two closest allies, who she sends into Homura's labyrinth to report to her what has happened. While the others do not seem to become soldiers or assets of the law of cycles, there are six important figures who could be represented by the clowns: Homura, Mami, Sayaka, Kyoko, Nagisa, and Hitomi. This actually fits way better for Madoka than it does for Homura, and I would say is one of the stronger points in favor for it being Madoka, even though I still personally believe it makes more sense narratively for it to be Homura. This may be a bit of a cop-out, but there is reason to believe that Walpurgisnacht could be both Madoka and Homura combined, which would help to fill in the gaps of its identity that align with one character more than the other. Madoka and Homura's stories are interconnected and have been ever since the original timeline where Madoka and Mami save her from the witch Isabel. Each movie is a back and forth between the pair. Beginnings, while primarily about Madoka's growth, is focused around Homura's continued efforts to stop Madoka becoming a magical girl in this most recent timeline. Eternal is then focused around Madoka's eventual breaking of the cycle to become a magical girl and the law of cycles. Rebellion then shifts the focus back to Homura, as it is her story where she tries to rebel against the law of cycles and succeeds. Following this narrative pattern, Walpurgisnacht Rising will naturally be about Madoka's answer to Akuma Homura. This narrative back and forth could ultimately be represented by Walpurgisnacht if it is a manifestation of both girls who are equally tied to the cycle of despair. Now, even though Shaft never confirms it, the pair may as well be a couple. Both of them are usually always seen together in promotional material. They have the closest scenes in the film and TV series, and even Homura's transformation into Akuma Homura is not because of a wish, but because of the power of love. In one of the prior timelines, the one before Homura begins her rampage to stop Kyubey reaching Madoka, the pair are both about to die. As they do, Homura suggests that they become witches together and destroy the world. Now, it may not be a big piece of evidence, but I think it would be interesting to look at Walpurgisnacht from the angle of it being the result of Madoka and Homura's love. You can see what I'm saying here, I don't really need to spell it out. In this way, Walpurgisnacht would essentially be their child. Okay, now let's actually talk about what new things we learned or what things have been reinforced in this trailer. The first thing I pointed out in the original trailer in 2023 was that there appeared to be three distinct versions of Homura: Parasol, Ribbon, and Prime, as I named them. At first, there was a little bit of evidence for a third, even though it was a bit shaky, but I was still adamant in my belief of three. The trailer has now gone ahead and confirmed it, and then some. We start with the Homura who I originally called Parasol Homura, falling backwards and all that as we saw at the start of the trailer. I will go ahead and call her Red Eyes since that Homura seems to match up with the one we see dancing later. She has purple hair, it's shorter, and of course she has red eyes and a different school uniform. To me, at least, the hair matches pretty well with what we saw with Parasol Homura in the original 2023 trailer, and her appearance there I think must be her magical girl form. The next is Ribbon or Mirror Homura, who we see in this trailer looking into the mirror and checking her face over. There is also the Homura who I called the Contractor, who at first I believed was also Parasol Homura, but given the blue or purple eyes, this cannot be the case, giving us yet another distinct version of Homura. For this version, I will call her Gown Homura. and of course Prime Homura, or the Homura from the main series who became Akuma at the end of the Rebellion film, who we see a little bit more of in this trailer. Something I need to note here is how weird and off-putting these other versions of Homura seem to be. In the first trailer, when we are introduced to Gown Homura, her demeanor is entirely off-putting because of how eerily happy she is, which is why I believe she was also Parasol Homura, who is also introduced in a similar manner. This is the version I talked about earlier, which vaguely looks like Walpurgisnacht with the design of her dress. Red Eyes, or Parasol Homura, is also introduced in an eerily happily manner initially, and in this most recent trailer when she dances with Madoka, the latter is confused or shocked, presumably because she is aware that there is something off with this Homura. Mirror Homura, to me, looks like she could be confused when she looks at her face, as if she isn't expecting to see what she did. All of this begs the question, why? Originally, I believed that Homura having so many copies was because of an anomaly in time causing actual different timeline or universe versions of her to converge. I now no longer believe this to be the case. Instead, I believe Mirror, Gown, Red Eyes, and potentially Ribbon Homura are transformed versions of the Claridolls, the minions of Homer Lily from Rebellion. As we looked at before in the trailer breakdown, there is an orange-haired Claridoll who looks through a magnifying glass. This could be linked to the scene of Mirror Homura, who is, well, looking into a mirror. Okay, this is kind of insane. So it's September 22nd right now. I'm still working on the video. I've been working on it since the day the trailer came out, but I needed to jump in here really quick because I just discovered something insane. So in this image that's on the screen right now, if you look at the Claridol in the top left picture, you'll notice that it's wearing a headpiece that is like black and has some grey markings on it. The pattern of it is nearly identical to the character I've been calling Red Eyes Homura or Parasol Homura, and I think this just adds yet another piece of evidence to the theory that these are transformed Claridolls. I believe that the Claridolls have no purpose as mere minions, and so Akuma Homura splits her consciousness among the Claridolls who now take her form. This is something that we know is potentially possible, at least the idea of splitting consciousness. The end of Rebellion literally sees Homura tear Madoka out of the Law of Cycles, but both entities still exist. The concept movie trailer continued to reinforce this idea by talking about how the lizard girl, Homura, tore the goddess apart. Homura has knowledge of how to do this by doing it to the Law of Cycles, so I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that she could do the same to herself. The question, once again, is why? Now, I think that the answer here is pretty simple: monitoring. I think Homura's reason behind doing something like this would be so that she could be in multiple places at once, making sure that the incubators don't get out of hand and keeping Madoka entertained. There is also the angle to consider that she is simply doing it so she can do everything she wants to do with Madoka. Multiple bodies means more chances to do these things like dancing. Dance has always been an interesting link between the pair, but they've never actually danced together. Madoka has been given ties to ballet in various media, and Homura is often seen trying to do the same. Once again, in the concept movie trailer, Madoka is seen performing ballet moves on her own as Homura watches and cheers for her. In Rebellion, the first nightmare of Hitomi, which is inside the labyrinth of Homura, is quite literally a ballet. The OST is even named Nightmare Ballet. The Cake song in Rebellion is a musical number. We know this because, like any musical, the song is performed by the characters in the scene, and this has another link to dance by way of theater. Once again in Rebellion, during the epilogue, we see Homura dancing alone. It's only now in Walpurgisnacht Rising that we see the pair actually dancing together. The fact that this is a different Homura leads me to believe that there are two outcomes here. One, it is the split consciousness of Akuma Homura possessing a Claridoll, as I theorized, and this is why Madoka is put off by her. Or two, it is a completely different universe or timeline version of Homura. If this were to be true, it does add more conflict for Akuma Homura, because then it wouldn't even be her dancing with Madoka. I think I am leaning more into the Claridol theory for the time being, just because the alternate universe concept may be a bit much to expect from this film, but I won't rule it out entirely. In the 2023 trailer, we got the reveal of a mysterious character who I named the Amalgamation. A lot of us pointed out a variety of similarities between her and the other members of the cast, which led to the assumption that she could be Walpurgisnacht's magical girl. This could still happen, but if you saw my video, you know that my theory is that she's actually a human form of the Law of Cycles who made a body for herself based on Madoka's memories. That said, some new things have been brought to light in this most recent trailer, specifically new characters. Now, I still think that the amalgamation is the Law of Cycles, but we need to take a look at the others we have been introduced to. In this trailer, we see two new characters and a possible third who I will point out shortly, which is the mysterious green haired girl in the caged area and the orange haired girl playing with Nagisa. Now, the third possible character is seen behind Madoka in the close up scene of her eating something with a fork, which is where I believe we can see someone with long, flowing light green or teal hair who is just out of focus. This also could be the same girl I just talked about, but I digress. Now, I can't unfortunately take full credit for the theory I'm about to present. I first heard it from a couple of friends of mine and some other community members, but it seems most of us are in agreement that the potential identities of these characters is that they are human forms of witches we have seen from the past in the TV series and first two films. We have a few options to look at, so let's take a look at who these girls might be and, try and predict who they will turn into. The green haired girl is the first we see and the one who seems to have a pretty clear answer to her identity. She could very likely be the first witch we are ever introduced to, the Rose Garden witch Gertrude, who first appears physically in episode 2 of the TV series and has a continued presence in other Madoka Magica related media. Now, I'm not sure if I believe this entirely, but there is some evidence for it, the biggest being the array of plants and her overall green color scheme. Some have pointed to her hair to say it could resemble grass, as well as the bag on the table which has floral decorations. These are very good points, however, I am not fully convinced. While we don't know much about Gertrude, what we do know is that she is an isolationist and hates letting people into her labyrinth out of a fear that they could trample her garden. Very importantly, Gertrude's garden is one of roses. It is why she is called the Rose Garden Witch, and her nature is distrustfulness. Based on the very little that we have seen so far, I am not entirely sold on this being Gertrude's magical goal. There are no roses in sight, she does not appear to be distrustful, and the point about her hair looking like grass is a loose one at best. As we talked about with Homura, Madoka, and the identity of Walpurgisnacht, a witch's nature is crucial to identifying them, and I feel like if this was Gertrude, we would see more overt references to her. Now, I believe she could still be a witch, however, not one that you might think about right away. I think it is possible for the girl to actually be Cheatery from Madoka Magica Portable. Cheatery is an interesting witch. She is called the Needle Witch, so named because her body is made of needles, and she has a respectful nature. Her wish seemed to be about something to do with saving the world because her biography states that she is the remains of a magical girl who believes she is still saving the world even now as a witch. So far, the new girl has been seen as at least amicable, as she shows her soul gem ring to presumably Madoka, and her demeanor seems generally positive. If she is here because she is trying to stop Walpurgisnacht, for example, I could see that tying into the lore of cheatery. I'd also like to point out that the needles which make up Cheatery's body are sewing needles, and perhaps the bag on her table is actually one of sewing supplies. Of course, this is all just speculation based on 2 or 3 seconds of footage, and we have no clue who they are, and they could also just be entirely new characters. The orange haired girl gives us even less to work with. She is so far doing the same kind of laugh as Nagisa and then likely being frozen in time later in the trailer. There is literally nothing we can pull from this, but if I had to guess, I would say for the sake of speculation that she could be Patricia, but only because of her wearing a school uniform, and that is barely a link at best. For it to actually be Patricia, she would have to have a fond love of school and be the class rep of wherever she is studying. A note here, we know that these girls are potentially from a different school because their uniform is actually a little different from the standard Mitaki Hara City school uniform. This is also the case for the Homura I've been calling Red Eyes, and the link shared between them all is they have a black collar, as opposed to the regular cream or white or beige that the other characters have. Now, I had initially thought of H and Ellie, which is also still possible, but I feel like Ellie's magical girl would be in her teens. Ellie's description also suggests that she was a shut in, which goes completely against what we are seeing here. Now, assuming that that is another character behind Madoka, there is really no point in trying to guess who it is. It could be the same new green haired girl, although to me the color is just a little too different and a bit too long. Um, but just for the sake of throwing a name out, if the green haired girl is cheatery, then I would like this mystery character to potentially be the other portable original witch, Eatsley, who is very interesting. She's said to be from Beyond the Stars. A couple of times in this trailer, we see scenes of what appears to be an enormous library, the one with the glass figure and the various copies of the same book. My initial thought about this is that it must be something to do with Homura. Perhaps these books record all of her attempted resets. Each one might have the visage of Walpurgisnacht on them as seen in a later shot, which could mean that each one contains different observations about the witch from each time Homura has reset. This makes sense to me. Homura hoards information about literally everything, and in the original series, she was the one who knew the most about Walpurgisnacht. Now, here's a question. Why is Sayaka here? I struggle to believe that Sayaka's role in Walpurgisnacht Rising will be like it was in Rebellion, so I don't think this is going to be like her infiltrating something, like after waking up from learning the truth or something like that. No. Instead, I think there is a high possibility that it's Homura showing her the truth. Now, I have a couple of observations to consider when saying this, so bear with me here. First, let's assume that the pages of these books are the witch and familiar profiles that we see earlier. Then, let's also assume that the scene of Sayaka in the auditorium is linked to this somehow. If this is all true, then I believe the structure of a scene like this would be something along the lines of Sayaka first being seen in the auditorium, being shown whatever it is she is, well, being shown on a stage or maybe a screen. Stage seems more likely given this series. She sees the library, she sees a book, opens the book to see the profiles of the witches, and then we come back to her in the auditorium and Octavia awakens within her. Going off of the concept movie trailer, I have formed a really bizarre theory to suggest why Homura is so interested in Sayaka if it is her showing the girl all of this. One of the most memorable things about the concept movie trailer is the fact that Sayaka has a bizarre face mask, and while that mask has thus far not shown up in the Walpurgisnacht Rising trailers, elements of it have survived due to the fact that Sayaka's face is covered in bandages in all material related to Walpurgisnacht Rising. This is important to keep in mind because it shows us that elements of the concept movie are still present in this movie. The other thing that the concept movie trailer has that I wish to point out is a shot where Sayaka is laying on her back in the aftermath of the fight against Walpurgisnacht while Octavia looms above her body, implying that she just died fighting the Ultimate Witch. We see Octavia for a single frame in this most recent trailer, and of course it's given me a little bit of room to form a theory. So, here is what I think is happening. Based on the scenes I have mentioned from here and the concept movie trailer, I theorize that Homura is trying to reawaken Octavia within Sayaka so she can then use Sayaka to replace Madoka as the one who fights, defeats, and subsequently dies to Walpurgisnacht. I don't really have a lot of evidence for this, I will admit, outside of what I have stated here, but I think it would be really in character for this version of Homura to do. She doesn't like Sayaka and has let her know it on multiple occasions. If this were pre-rebellion Homura, this would absolutely not be possible, because even though she didn't like Sayaka there either, at least she was amicable to the goal and did not harm her. In Rebellion, however, after Akuma Homura is born, she actively taunts the girl about her futility and erases her memories on the spot. Now, you might point out that if Homura erased her memories, why would she then want to bring them back? Well, I have a couple of counterpoints for this. The first being that she could only be bringing back specific memories related to Octavia, and also consider that in Rebellion, Homura had no reason to assume that witches, let alone Walpurgisnacht, were going to come back. By all accounts, they shouldn't really come back in her mind. Of course, we can look at why Walpurgisnacht is back, and that's likely because of the lack of the Law of Cycles. Maybe Homura wants Sayaka to take on the role of Madoka insofar as being the one to kill Walpurgisnacht. I'd like to then extend this to the reason why Mami, Sayaka, and Kyoko have these new designs and why all of them are magical girls at all. In my 2023 trailer analysis, I put forth the idea that the redesigns are a result of slightly different wishes being made by the girls in this world. But now, if we look at the pieces of evidence to suggest that Sayaka could be a weapon, perhaps all three are being used as weapons by Homura to slay Walpurgisnacht, and the subtle redesigns are a result of what Homura has given them. Sayaka's masked face represents her loss of autonomy, Mami's ribbon being absent could represent her loss of creativity, and Kyoko's wilder appearance suggests Homura just needs her for her raw strength without the intelligence that usually backs it up. You could think of it like a lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow type situation, with Homura both being the wizard and the wicked witch. The last thing I want to talk about here is the final shot of the trailer, a multitude of white feathers flying up towards a beacon of light while one descends and begins to turn black. White feathers, or at least the color of white itself, is usually associated with Madoka and specifically the Law of Cycles. The scene itself even seems to evoke the same imagery seen in Rebellion as the Law of Cycles crossed into Homura's labyrinth. To that end, black feathers are of course associated with Homura and specifically Akuma Homura. So what is the meaning of the scene here? I believe there are two likely ways to look at it. The first is that it could easily just be symbolism for how Homura has control over Madoka in this new world and nothing more. The other option, however, I think is something very fun to consider. Ever since 2021, my belief has been that Madoka would be an antagonist in this film. Not insofar as being evil or a villain or corrupted or something like that, but if Homura is the hero of her world and Madoka tries to stop her, that would of course make the latter a villain from the perspective of the hero. Think Thanos in Infinity War. The Black Feather could easily symbolize this, as either Madoka taking on the role of antagonist from Homura's POV or the Law of Cycles itself being the enemy in the film. If you made it this far, thank you very much. It took me nearly a week to get my thoughts together and compile everything I had planned to talk about, and as you can see, I actually put a little bit more effort into the editing of this video. Regardless of all of that, I just hope that this analysis and speculation talk was fun to watch and gives you all some ideas to work with as you speculate amongst yourselves. I'm looking forward to interacting with all of you again and hearing your thoughts in the comments below. I won't promise any future videos, but if I do release any more, I hope to see you all there for whatever we discuss in the future. Until next time, thank you very much for watching and listening. This is Luca, signing off.